The house was never loud, but it used to feel alive. In the early days, sound followed them everywhere, soft laughter spilling from the kitchen, arguments that ended with smiles, music playing too loudly on Sunday mornings. Even their silences had meaning then. They were comfortable, warm, shared. Now, the silence was different. Now, it watched them. Ayan noticed it most in the evenings. The clock would tick louder than usual, each second echoing through the living room like a reminder of something missing. Sarah would sit on the far end of the couch, her legs folded beneath her, her phone resting dark and untouched in her hand. Not scrolling. Not typing. Just holding it, as if it were an anchor keeping her from drifting too far away. He wanted to ask her what she was thinking. He always stopped himself. Dinner was the hardest. 2 plates placed carefully on the table. 2 glasses of water filled to the same level. Ayan would clear his throat, waiting for a question, a comment, anything. Sarah would lower her gaze and begin eating slowly, mechanically, as though the food had no taste. "How was your day?" he almost said. Almost. The words hovered at the back of his throat but never came out. He told himself he was tired. He told himself tomorrow would be better. He told himself that silence meant peace, that if she wasn't complaining, everything must be fine. He didn't realize how wrong he was. Sarah remembered when the silence first arrived. It didn't come suddenly. It crept in quietly, the way dust settles on furniture when no one is paying attention. At first, it was just a few missed conversations. Ayan coming home later than usual. His replies turning shorter. His eyes drifting elsewhere when she spoke. She had tried to talk. She really had. But every time she began, he seemed distracted, checking his phone, rubbing his temples, sighing like her words were another burden added to his already heavy day. So she started choosing silence instead. It felt easier than explaining feelings he didn't seem ready to hear. Over time, silence became routine. Morning silence while brushing their teeth side by side, staring at their reflections without meeting each other's eyes. Afternoon silence in unanswered messages left unseen. Nighttime silence as they lay inches apart, facing opposite walls, listening to the same ceiling fan spin endlessly. Sometimes Sarah would turn toward him in the dark, studying his face, hoping he would feel her gaze and turn back. He never did. And every time he didn't, something inside her folded inward. Ayan sensed the distance but didn't know how to name it. He told himself relationships had phases. He told himself love matured into quiet. He believed that loud passion was childish and that what they had now was stability. But stability shouldn't feel this lonely. Some nights, he replayed old memories in his mind, the way Sarah used to talk with her hands, the way she laughed without covering her mouth, the way she would interrupt him just to add something unimportant but joyful. He missed those things, but he assumed they would return on their own. Love, he believed, didn't need constant attention. Silence, he believed, was harmless. Sarah stopped crying first. That scared her more than the tears ever did. When she realized she no longer felt angry or sad, just numb, she knew something was wrong. She would sit alone in the bedroom, surrounded by photos of a life that once felt full, wondering how 2 people could share the same space and still feel like strangers. She wanted him to ask. She needed him to ask. But days passed, and Ayan never did. One evening, a storm raged outside. Thunder cracked the sky open, rain beating violently against the windows. The house should have felt alive again, but inside, everything remained painfully quiet. Sarah finally spoke. "Ayan," she said softly. He looked up, surprised, as if her voice had startled him. "Yes." The moment hung between them. She had so much to say about feeling invisible, about missing him, about how silence was slowly killing her. But when she saw the tiredness in his eyes, the words collapsed. Nothing, she whispered. It's nothing. He nodded, relieved, and turned back to his phone. And just like that, the silence grew heavier. That night, as they lay in bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling and made a quiet decision she didn't yet fully understand. If silence was all that remained between them, she would stop fighting it. Ayan fell asleep easily, unaware that the quiet he had learned to ignore was already taking something precious away. The house stood still, filled with unspoken words, unmet needs, and a silence that wasn't empty at all. It was full of everything they were losing. Silence didn't just live between them anymore. It lived inside Sarah. She carried it with her throughout the day, like a weight resting on her chest, heavy, constant, impossible to put down. At work, she smiled when spoken to, answered questions, laughed at the right moments. No one noticed the emptiness behind her eyes. No one ever did. By the time she returned home each evening, she felt drained, as if she had already spent all the words she had in the world on people who weren't the one she needed most. Ayan would be there, sometimes scrolling through his phone, sometimes staring blankly at the television. He always greeted her, but the greeting felt practiced, automatic. "You're home," he would say. She would nod. That was enough, apparently. Sarah remembered when she used to talk endlessly about her day, about the small victories, the annoyances, the thoughts that crowded her mind. Ayan used to listen then, really listen. He would ask questions, tease her gently, pull her closer when she spoke too fast. Now, when she tried, his attention drifted. His replies came late or not at all. And each time that happened, she learned a quiet lesson: her words were no longer welcome. So she stopped offering them. At first, she told herself it was temporary. That he was stressed. That work was consuming him. She waited for the right moment, the right mood, the right version of him to return. But waiting became a habit. And habits became distance. There were nights she rehearsed conversations in her head, carefully chosen words, calm tones, no accusations. She imagined sitting across from him, explaining how lonely she felt even when he was right beside her. In her imagination, he listened. In reality, she stayed silent. She feared being dramatic. She feared being told she was overthinking. More than anything, she feared that if she spoke and he still didn't listen, she would finally have proof that she no longer mattered the way she once did. Silence felt safer than rejection. Ayan, on the other hand, believed he was giving her space. He noticed she spoke less, laughed less, moved through the house quietly, but he mistook her withdrawal for strength. She's independent, he told himself. She doesn't need constant reassurance. He didn't realize that independence, when forced, feels a lot like abandonment. Sometimes he would sense something wrong, an unspoken tension, a heaviness in the air. He would glance at her, wondering if he should ask. But the moment always passed. He convinced himself that bringing it up would only create unnecessary conflict. And so, he stayed quiet too. Two people, both waiting for the other to speak. Sarah started writing instead. Late at night, when Ayan was asleep, she would sit by the dim light of her phone and type out everything she couldn't say aloud. Notes filled with unfinished sentences, questions without answers, feelings without names. Why don't you see me anymore? When did I become optional? Do you miss us the way I do? She never sent those words. They stayed locked away, witnesses to a pain that existed only in silence. The more she wrote, the clearer her thoughts became and the sadder she felt. Writing showed her a truth she had been avoiding: she was no longer fighting for the relationship because she was tired of fighting alone. One evening, Ayan forgot their anniversary. It wasn't intentional. He had a long day, deadlines piling up, messages buzzing non-stop. By the time he got home, exhaustion had erased the date from his mind. Sarah had remembered, though. She had waited all day not for gifts or grand gestures, but for acknowledgement. For proof that she still mattered enough to be remembered. When the night passed without a word, something inside her went quiet forever. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply understood. That night, she lay beside him, listening to his breathing, realizing that love doesn't always end with shouting or betrayal. Sometimes, it ends slowly when words remain unsaid for too long. Silence had protected her once. Now, it was teaching her how to let go. And Ayan, unaware of the shift happening inches away from him, slept peacefully, never hearing the goodbye Sarah was already whispering in her heart. The house felt emptier than ever when Ayan returned that evening. Sarah was gone. No note, no whispered goodbye, no clue left behind. Only her absence. The quiet that had once felt heavy now felt like a void, swallowing everything around it. At first, he thought she might just be in the garden or at a friend's place. Maybe she had gone for a walk to clear her mind. But hours passed, and the unease in his chest grew into something he couldn't ignore. The silence had transformed into a scream, loud and impossible to ignore. He searched the house. Every drawer, every corner, every closet, her presence was gone. Her clothes remained, neatly folded in the wardrobe, untouched. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter, a faint lipstick mark on the rim. Each item, familiar and ordinary, suddenly felt like a dagger. Ayan's phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls from her, messages unanswered. Each one made his heart pound harder. He realized then that he hadn't just ignored her silence, he had taken it for granted. He had believed it was a choice, a pause, something temporary. But silence had been her voice all along. In desperation, he opened her diary. He never expected to find it there, tucked away beneath the bed. The pages smelled faintly of her perfume, and as he read, it was as though her thoughts had been etched directly onto his soul. I begged you in 1,000 silent ways. You never listened. I waited for your questions, your concern, your touch, but you were always somewhere else. I needed you when I went quiet, but you chose to stay blind. I can't keep being invisible to the one I love most. Ayan's hands shook. The words burned on the page, but they were the truth he had refused to see. Every unspoken feeling, every plea hidden behind a quiet face, every lonely night she endured, he had ignored it all. He sank to the floor, clutching the diary to his chest. The house, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a cold prison, echoing with the absence of her laughter, her words, and her presence. For the first time, Ayan understood the weight of silence. It wasn't emptiness, it was accumulation. Every ignored sigh, every unanswered question, every moment of quiet dismissal had built a wall between them. And now, that wall had become insurmountable. He tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic replaced regret, urgency replaced numbness. He needed to find her, to explain, to make her hear how sorry he was, but he didn't know where to start. He thought of all the times she had spoken without words. The way she lingered at the doorway, hoping he would notice. The way her eyes fell whenever he was distracted. The tiny gestures that had once been invisible to him now screamed in his mind. Every moment he had failed to listen returned to him as piercing pain. He realized that love isn't just about being present, it's about noticing, responding, caring. And he had failed in the quietest, most devastating way possible. Ayan grabbed his coat and ran into the night, the rain soaking through his clothes as if the world itself was punishing him for his neglect. Every street corner, every bus stop, every familiar place they had shared together felt empty without her. Finally, he found himself standing at the edge of the park where they had spent countless evenings talking, laughing, and dreaming. And there she was sitting on the same bench, staring at the rain, a suitcase beside her. The sight of her, so still and distant, hit him harder than anything before. "Sarah," he called out, voice trembling. She looked at him, her eyes calm but full of exhaustion. For a moment, he thought she might not respond. Then she whispered, "I waited too long for you to hear me." He fell to his knees beside her, tears mingling with the rain. "I see you now. I hear you. I should have heard you all along." Her silence was no longer just hers, it had become the loudest pain he had ever felt. And in that moment, Ayan realized that some lessons can only be learned too late, and some silences, once stretched long enough, cannot be filled with words alone. The rain had stopped, leaving the park glistening under the dim glow of the streetlights. Puddles reflected the fractured light, mirroring the fragments of their relationship. Ayan sat beside Sarah on the cold, wet bench, his hands trembling, his heart pounding in a way it never had before. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have listened. I should have seen you, really seen you." Sarah looked at him, her eyes tired, guarded. She had spent countless nights rehearsing this moment in her mind, and yet, facing him now, the weight of all that unspoken pain felt heavier than ever. "You didn't hear me when it mattered," she said softly. "I needed words when I went silent, but you waited until I disappeared." Ayan's chest tightened. Every word she spoke was a mirror reflecting his failures. I thought silence was strength. I thought if you weren't complaining, everything was fine. I thought," his voice trailed off as tears slipped down his cheeks. He wanted to explain, to justify, to fix it all with words, but he knew there were no words strong enough to undo the months of neglect. Sarah took a deep breath. "I tried to tell you in small ways, Ayan. I tried to let you see my pain without saying it outright. I thought you'd notice, that you'd care enough to ask. But you didn't." "I know now," he said, his voice shaking. "I should have. I should have seen your silence as a cry, not a choice. I should have been there. I failed you in ways I can't even put into words." For a moment, the world felt still. The hum of the city around them faded, leaving only the raw tension between two people who had loved fiercely but failed painfully. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She wanted to reach out, to feel his warmth again, to close the distance that had grown between them, but she hesitated. "I loved you," she whispered, voice trembling. "But love isn't just about staying. Love is about noticing, about being present. And you weren't. Not when I needed you most." Ayan's hands found hers, cold and trembling. "I see it now. I feel it now. And I swear, I will never let silence be louder than us again. I will listen, Sarah. I will hear you, every word, every sigh, every glance." She looked down at their intertwined hands, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch, the echo of the bond they had once shared. But years of quiet heartbreak had left a scar too deep to ignore. "I needed that before, months ago," she said. "I can't go back in time, Ayan. You had your chance to hear me, and you didn't." His chest tightened, a painful mix of guilt and desperation. "I know I failed. But please, don't leave like this. Let me make it right, even if it's only a start. I can't promise the past back, but I can promise you now, I will never ignore you again." Sarah closed her eyes, breathing in the damp air, the faint scent of rain mixing with the memory of him, the memory of them. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this was not too late. But love isn't only about promises, it's about proof. And the proof of their silence had been too loud, too long. "I can't stay," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his. "Not tonight. Not until I know you truly hear me, not just now, but always. I need to feel that before I can stay. I can't risk my heart on words alone anymore." Ayan's grip tightened, but he didn't pull her back. He understood. The lesson was harsh, but clear. Love without listening is loneliness, and sometimes, letting go is the only way to show that love still matters. I understand, he whispered, though his voice cracked. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes to earn the chance to be heard. I'll wait, Sarah, as long as you need. They sat in silence then, side by side, hands still entwined, hearts aching with unspoken apologies and lingering love. The street lights flickered above, casting shadows that danced across the empty park, echoing the fragility of the bond they once thought unbreakable. Sarah finally stood, her suitcase at her side. Ayan rose as well, reaching for her hand one last time. She let him hold it, feeling the familiar warmth and the unbearable weight of goodbye. I have to go, she said softly, tears rolling freely now. But maybe, one day, we can try again. If we both learn to truly hear each other. He nodded, unable to speak, letting her pull away. And as she walked into the distance, Ayan felt the hollow ache of regret settle deep inside him. Some silences are unbearable, and some lessons are learned too late. But in that quiet, amidst the lingering pain, a small hope remained, one that whispered of redemption, patience, and the possibility that love, if truly heard, could survive even the deepest silence. The taxi took Sarah far from the city, from the apartment that had once been filled with laughter and arguments and shared dreams. Ayan had not followed. He had stood on the curb, rain-soaked and silent, watching her disappear into the night. Words, promises, apologies, they felt empty now. The truth was in the absence, in the space where love had once lived. Sarah stared out the window, watching the streets blur past. She felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief, because she had finally broken the chains of quiet despair that had trapped her. Heartbreak, because letting go of someone you love never comes without pain. Meanwhile, Ayan sat alone in the apartment. The silence he had once mistaken for peace now screamed in his ears. Every corner reminded him of her, the mug she had left on the counter, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the notebook of unspoken words he had only recently discovered. He realized then, fully and painfully, that silence is not absence of sound, it is absence of care. And sometimes, it is louder than any argument, any accusation, any cry. Days turned into weeks. Ayan learned to speak to himself honestly for the first time in months. He reflected on the moments he had ignored, the subtle cues he had dismissed, the small ways Sarah had tried to reach him. He understood, painfully, that love is not just about being present, it is about noticing, responding, and valuing the quiet pleas that hide behind smiles and nods. Sarah, too, moved forward cautiously. She found a small apartment of her own, a place where she could breathe and think without the weight of unacknowledged silence pressing down on her. She wrote in her journal again, this time freely, without restraint, without expectation. The act of putting words to paper was healing, a reminder that her voice mattered even if no one else had heard it before. And yet, even with distance, the memory of Ayan lingered. Not as anger, not as resentment, but as a bittersweet lesson about what it means to love and to be loved inadequately. Months later, Ayan returned to the park where he had first found her. He sat on the same wet bench, clutching her diary like a lifeline. He reread her words, absorbing them, letting the grief, guilt, and understanding wash over him. He whispered promises into the cold air, promises to himself as much as to her. I will listen. I will care. I will notice. I will never let silence go unheard again. He didn't know if she would ever return, and perhaps she never would. But he understood now that love is not about grand gestures or fleeting words, it is about consistently hearing and honoring the quiet, the subtle, the small. The unspoken feelings are sometimes the loudest cries. Sarah walked along a distant street, pausing to watch children play in a fountain. A gentle smile touched her lips. She had loved deeply, and she had learned deeply. She had let go not because she wanted to, but because love without listening is loneliness, and some silences, once stretched long enough, leave marks that cannot easily be healed. Yet, hope remained. Hope that the lesson she and Ayan had learned in silence would someday guide them, or at least guide them toward people who could truly hear them. Hope that love, when truly heard, could survive even the heaviest silence. Sometimes, silence hurts more than words. And sometimes, by the time we hear it, the story has changed, sometimes forever. But within that silence, within the heartbreak and regret, there is a lesson. Listen. Truly listen. Don't wait for the loudest cry to realize the quietest heart is breaking. Ayan learned this too late, but he learned it. And in learning, there was a sliver of redemption. Sarah had moved on, and so must he, but both carried the truth: silence is not empty. It is full of what is unsaid, and if ignored long enough, it can reshape lives. Love demands attention, care, and presence even when words are absent. And in the end, that is the cruel, beautiful, painful lesson of silence.